So then Dia de los Muertos, I personally don't celebrate it. I grew up in a very like Hispanic city. Nobody I know there celebrates it. I think it's only like a Mexico thing. Not only a Mexico thing, but majority people who migrate to the U.S. don't really celebrate it. But I still wanted to like get more in deep with where my parents come from, because I want to know more, because for when I plan on going living over there. Cool. So it takes place from November 1st to November 2nd. The reason it takes place during these 2 days is because when the conquistadors and the Catholic Church started taking over that region, they already had their set holidays for honoring their dead. So they just made whoever was dead, whoever they're taking over, like, we're gonna move your traditions to ours. So November 1st is called All Saints Day for the conquistadors of Catholicism. That's where they only praise holy figures like saints, people, and all that stuff in their church. That's when you're supposed to celebrate them and honor them. And November 2nd is called All Souls Day. And that's when you just pray and do what Day of the Dead is already doing. So as their version, it just took the traditions of the tribes around them and just combined them together. Alright, here's some rituals. So there's going to be many rituals that occur in the 2-day celebration when honoring the dead. In order to understand why it takes place in the first place, we got to understand like what's like at stake. And what's at stake is that the border between like the spirit world and the physical world becomes like really thin to where they can cross over. And in order to have them cross over, you got to start celebrating them. You have to sit down the marigolds, but what they call them is symbolism flowers. It's just like those little gold flowers you see like in all around, and you just place them around because they have a very strong scent, and it helps guide the spirits to where you want to guide them to, specifically like to their gravestones or to your house. You got to make a little pathway for them. Usually you do like at the border of, depending where you are. If you're like in a small town, you can do it at the border of your town. If it's a city, you just do it where it's convenient. And you got to lead them to either the gravestone, where if you want to have a picnic there, or to your house, or both usually. And that's where you have your altars, where you have your ofrendas, where you have a little altar set up with pictures of your family members, considering how many you want to honor, and a whole bunch of like foods and like drinks and stuff that you want to honor them with. But the same tradition is shared with the Nahua people, who are going to be known as like the Aztec Empire descendants, like direct descendants. And they have similar things, but they celebrate kind of towards August, where they start doing their traditions. And the reason they do kind of the same thing is because they want to help guide their deceased on the 9-year journey, where they have to go through multiple 9 levels, so they could get to the place called Chukunameclan, which is the land of the dead, basically. So that place in Coco where it's all fancy and stuff is all own people. So you have to guide them and help them on their journey to get all that stuff ready for them. So they do have assistance. And yeah, so attire. So for the Day of the Dead in Mexico, fashion can be a big part of the holiday. Usually, traditionally for women, they're gonna wear puebla dresses. And it's gonna be like a pretty like flowy dress. Usually it has floral designs on it. It can be in multiple colors. And for men, they usually wear either a tuxedo or like a suit, something formal, but something like that's just like has like the big like traditional attire would be called a charo suit, which is just like what you see mariachi band members wear. And for both men and women, you usually have to wear, well, you don't have to, but it's nice to add like a little hat on top. Usually that's gonna be like very like 1800s like French influence is where it really comes from, but now you can wear sombrero or whatever you want to wear. And just like little add-ons you could do is just like, what I've seen is people do the rhinestones to add on top of their makeup. And when it comes to the makeup, you want to usually do the skull, which is going to be in reference to the Catrina myth. And you just want to embellish her because of what she stands for, which we'll get into in a little bit. And usually just add different things. And you could do that skull color in many different ways and colors and stuff like that. Cool. Here's all the food. So it's gonna be a lot of food for this holiday. A lot of it is just like food that Mexicans just make all the time, but you just make them a very specific way and you just make all of them together, almost like a Thanksgiving feast, but for this specific 2-day celebration. Some of the foods are gonna be like tamales, mole is like a specific meat drenched in The sauce, it's really good. It depends on where you get it to. Each different like state in Mexico is gonna make it a different way. Like I know where my dad comes from, it's like chocolate sauce based on that meat. And then where my mom comes, it's more spice based. Some other things are gonna be the pan de muertos. And it's gonna be like this sugary bread that's shaped in like a little bone shape, just covered in sugar. Another thing that I thought was like really weird was called chapulines, which is just fried grasshopper.
Oh,
and
yeah!
They make that all the time because it goes back to when they, like the Aztec times where that was like their only source of protein. Not the only source, but it was a big source of protein that they would eat, so they just kept on continuing that little food tradition now.
They're so good.
Oh, another thing is pozole. Pozole is like,
yes.
I fucking love pozole. It's so good.
It's so good.
It's so good. It's like a meat stew type thing where it's blended with spice as well, because you always gotta have spice. It has hominy in it. It's depends on what kind of meat you do. Some people do chicken, some people do pork, some other people do different things. But usually it's hominy, chicken, or whatever type of meat you want, and some vegetables put in there. Cool. And some myths. When it comes to like myths and telling stories for Day of the Dead, usually you just tell stories about your deceased, and stories about people you used to know back before they died, and you just tell stories about your family. But like the main ones can be like Catrina, that everybody widely knows in the entire region. And like Catrina was just a illustration in 1910 written by the gentleman José Guadalupe Posada, and he did this just as an illustration for a political thing that was happening at the time for the president. His name was Diaz, and a lot of people consider him like the very starting point of why the Mexican Revolution happened in the early 1900s. And the reason Posada drew this little configuration is his specific style. Well, when he would draw just illustrations, he was an illustrator, like whether it be like political or other activist things. He would always draw whoever he was drawing about, or talking about whatever group he was talking about. He would always draw them as skeletons. And the reason he did that is because he just wanted to like show in his own way that like no matter what group you are, who you are, what you are a part of, that we're all going to the same place anyway. But for this specific one, here that everybody it like symbolizes now in Mexico, like the ones that everybody widely knows is like Catrina. It's because Posada, he drew this in order to like kind of mock that president at the time who was like just making all the wrong decisions, because that president was super like infatuated by like high society European stuff. Like he didn't really care about like the country in Mexico. He just wanted to be. He was a very elitist. He was like Jefferson basically. Where he was very elitist. He only cared like about like high society France stuff. He like, and then after he got kicked out of being president, like once the revolution, he just moved to Paris, and that's where he died. But Posada, he drew this illustration just as like a thing to make fun of him. And what they called it originally, before Calavera Catrina, is what they called it La Calavera Garbancera. And Garbancera, or La Catrina part, or La Calavera part means the skeleton woman. Garbancera means, there's no like English word for it. There's like a definition for it in English, but there's no word for it. And Garbancera means just an indigenous Mexican woman who abandons her Mexican like roots in order to what's the word? Embrace European standards. It's basically a person who's like I would say like somebody who's like just becomes like completely whitewashed and just ignores their like culture. And that was the thing that Posada did when he first drew this back in 1910. After a while, that Garbancera term and like Calavera, it kind of got mixed in as time went on with Catrin, which meant somebody who dresses like dandy and well dressed. And with that, people started taking that new meaning for this as a symbolization. And after a while, Diego Rivera, he was a artist, like an actual painter, around the let's see, whenever Frida was born. It was like 50s, I think. But Diego Rivera, he drew a mural in Mexico City, somewhere in downtown, where he drew like Catrina holding hands with Posada, the original illustrator, and he drew holding on the other side Frida Kahlo, which was his wife. And she's a famous artist as well. And from that, that's where it like really blew up in the country. And that's when everybody started like making her a symbol, the Catrina. That's when everybody started adopting that stuff and putting on their makeup and all their inspiration for their makeup and all that stuff.
Nice.
And that illustration that he drew on the mural was called Dream of a Sunday Afternoon in Alameda Central. And I have a video to show. Get bigger.
It might not.
Today is the day after death parade. What's the function? To get a press con, and we're gonna take some cool photos and videos.
Yeah, I should bring it out.
Todos me dicen el negro llorona, negro, pero cariñoso. Todos me dicen el negro llorona, negro.
Ah, that's awesome. Wow.
I want that now.
I was just like Disneyland parade.
Yeah.
Pero sabroso, yo soy como el chile verde, llorona picante, pero sabroso. Ay, de mi llorona, 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 y llévame al río. De mi llorona, 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 y llévame al río. Tápame con tu rebozo, llorona, porque me muero de frío. Tápame con tu rebozo, llorona.
That was it.
Cool. Really great job.